So Dr. Parker is going to lead us off today from Matthew Gilbert Middle School. She's going to talk about their Wow Wednesdays, which is a program that they've developed around reading and listening across the content areas. And so I am just really honored and humbled to have both of them with us today. Dr. Parker, I'm going to turn it over to you. And one thing before I turn it over, you can see that both of these leaders are in their offices and they are busy administrators. So thank you for making the time today, both of you. We really, really appreciate it.
Great, thank you, and hello again to all. I am Dr. LaTonya Parker. I am the extreme proud principal at Matthew Gilbert Middle School. It is on the east side of Jacksonville, Florida, near our stadium where the Jaguars play. So just to give you an idea of where we're located in the city. And just excited to be a part of this. We have done, I come to a school that was in what we call turnaround status, where they had been a consistent D school for 3 or more years. And last year we improved our school grade to a C, and we are striving for that B this year. So a lot of work went into the last 5 years to ensure that our teachers and our students were well equipped with what we needed to make sure that we were continuing to improve and engage the students while we were doing that work. So Wild Wednesday, this came about because I have done work in the turnaround before when I was in elementary. So when I got to Gilbert and I realized where we were in that turnaround status, I thought about Wild Wednesday, which stands for the way of work. So one of the things that we wanted to do was make sure we were aligned with our school improvement plan in order to align with all content areas, not just reading or not just math, but just make sure that we were aligned. So what we did, I presented this to the team and we moved forward with Wild Wednesday. And it looks different in different schools based on what your goal is, but we were able to ensure that our students were able to, and our teachers understood the process and the goal for this process. So the purpose of the way of work is of Wild Winds is to strengthen our established to provide intentional targeted academic supports that directly strengthen our students' performance across all content areas. The initiative ensured that reading and listening strategies were not only isolated to one classroom or subject, but embedded school-wide through a cohesive instructional practice. By aligning our literacy routines, academic discourse, and our data-informed strategy. So it connected every moving part, teachers, leaders, students around a shared goal, which was to definitely look at our data, allow that data to drive our small groups, our targeted groups, to put these practices into place, to drill down on what our students needed to be successful in all content areas. So across the content areas, the teachers intentionally integrated research-based literacy strategies to strengthen the students' comprehension and critical thinking skills, which is a part of our school improvement plan. Students were engaged in annotation strategies by highlighting key ideas, academic vocabulary. We know our students, Gilbert has a history of reading being one of the lower areas of growth. We always trend in the historic data with math and improving, but reading was always either stagnant or just a minimum growth. So we looked at those research-based strategies for reading that we could implement across each content area. So again, with academic vocabulary and textual evidence and ELA, science, and social studies texts. And through reciprocal teaching, predicting, questioning, clarifying, and summarizing, students were able to participate in structured academic discourse that deepened their understanding in the complex concepts across discipline. The content-specific vocabulary routines were embedded to explicitly teach and reinforce the discipline base that we were trying for students to learn, especially with those different terminologies. And so for our closed reading, we implemented using text-dependent questions, requiring students to return to the text for evidence-based responses. And one of the things that we learned about our students was that they were not having that accountable discourse. So we gave them sentence starters, conversation starters, for them to be able to have that accountable discourse. So for our listening strategies across the content, teachers really embedded structured discourse and processing routines to strengthen the students' engagement and comprehension. Using accountable talk stems, as I just talked about, giving them those cues, those cards to use to have those conversations to guide respectful, evidence-based dialogue. While structured academic talk protocols such as think, pair, share, turn to your shoulder partner, were ensured that all students were equitable and had equitable opportunities to process and articulate their thinking. A lot of times students are able to read something, but they're not able to articulate it, summarize it, so that way they can share out what they were learning. And then we also included across the school was note-taking framework, which included Cornell notes and content-specific graphic organizers. That was a non-negotiable, if you will, that we had students had to have a journal or they had to have a composition notebook to either make it an interactive journal where they were taking notes on guided notes to support and organizing the concepts and making connections as they were learning. So the implementation across the content, this is just a small scope of what Wow Wednesday ensured was that the literacy was not confined to ELA. Disciplinary literacy requires students to read, write, speak, and listen. Like mathematicians, scientists, and historians, they have to do all of the above. So we created a coherence across the instructional day where we would see these things in each content area. So this is an artifact of our Wow Wednesdays. This is 2 math classes and then 1 social studies class to show that how the students were engaged in those conversations, how we grouped them to ensure based on their data set to ensure that they were working in a cohesive group and the teachers were guiding and facilitating those groups, not being the sage on the stage, if you will, but wanting to make sure that they are listening to what the students were saying and utilizing those strategies that we talked about. So as a result, what we learned was it demonstrated that measurable growth in our school-wide data. It confirmed that intentional targeted support leads to meaningful gains in student achievement. We learned that with the interventions and strategic, data-driven, and consistent implementation, it produced positive academic outcomes for our students. More importantly, this experience, it reinforced the success is not accidental. It requires alignment. And once we were all on one accord with understanding the importance of implementing those instructional interventions, the professional learning, and the student support, it connected a cohesive manner for us to make an impact that was significant to our growth. Therefore, we saw an improvement in our school grade, and we attribute this working together and looking at data and having those conversations across the school as a part of that growth for the overall school improvement. So we did survey our students. We surveyed them to see if this was something that they enjoyed, they were engaged, and we got the results here. Just to give you some of the words, we did a word while they were better prepared. They saw that we were identifying their learning needs. They were confident in using their own data because that was something that we also required, that was a non-negotiable. They had to have individual student data chats. They had to look at their data to know why they were in the groups that they were in to have a better understanding. They saw that they got support. So just to give you an idea of getting the feedback from the students as it relates to implementing this with fidelity. We tried it 1 year just to introduce it, to get our our bearings, how it would work, and then we went full implementation the next year and making sure as a part of the NSI work, it gave us those steps for us to even to get to this point where the students can give us some concrete data. So the impact on teaching and learning for us was when the literacy was embedded school-wide, the students experienced consistent expectations. It made a difference in the structures, and participation increased with our students, and all voices were heard. We heard from the students, we heard from the teachers, we heard from the leadership team, the instructional team, and how we were able to make a difference with being consistent in the way of work. And those were the research that I referenced in the one of the slides. And that's it.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I encourage people, if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat, and we'll read them. I'll just start it off by saying, so like this happened on Wednesdays, and it made Wednesdays different from other days. Did you start getting any comments of people saying like, why can't we do this other days, or like one day is enough?
So we looked at our schedule. At the time, we were on a 4-5 period day. We changed our schedule, I believe, 3 times since I've been here. So we started out on 90 minutes, then we went from 90 minutes to 60 minutes. Then we looked at the number of electives that we had, because we created our entire school-wide Wild Wednesday small groups where we were pulling. I had a small group. The assistant principal had a small group. So we had to strategically look at, again, our data set based on our district assessment progress monitoring data to determine what kids we wanted to target first, how we wanted to target them, and what groups they would participate in. And then we did it by the subject area. So teachers, after and that particular time, we had 2 days a week where we were doing every week we were doing PLCs. So PLCs then ceased after Christmas break in January, so we could add additional days if teachers wanted that time to pull their groups additionally. So Wednesdays was our sacred day. That's non-negotiable. That's our day. That's our time. But if you want an additional time with your groups based on what you were seeing, and then the progress monitoring that we were doing based on the benchmarks we were covering when we had those students, that then determined if the teachers were able to pick up an additional day, but it was during their planning time that they would have had the professional learning groups.
Great, thank you. I think I saw one question in the chat there. Did I see it, Greg or Anne?
Yes, I just asked the question, Dr. Parker. You had mentioned data points to group the students, and I wondered if you could elaborate and share the data points that you used to group the students.
Yes, so we administer what we call DMs, which are district monitoring assessments, at the beginning of the year, again in the mid-year before we leave for Christmas break, and then at the end of the year when we come back. We also use the state assessment monitoring piece, which is our progress monitoring, which is also administered around the same time. So we use those 2 assessment data points to determine our bottom quartile students, our students that are proficient, and our students that are progressing. So from there, we determine which students that will be in our denominator for our overall school grade, and we then create those small groups. We also look at the benchmarks that are assessed, because if the students are not mastering that benchmark, and it's a benchmark that has already been taught, then we want to make sure that we come back and remediate that benchmark to ensure that the students will be proficient in that particular benchmark, especially if it's a benchmark that they're going to see again on the test at the end of the year. We want to make sure that we are preparing them for any skills lesson that they may need that remediation. So we use those 2 points of data in particular to decide who those bottom quartile students will be, who are proficient students, because we don't want to forget about our proficient students. So we do create a group for them as well, but that's just to give them an additional review of any benchmarks, but more so we focus on those students that are performing at that bottom quartile, because those are the students that are right on the cusp that we can definitely get to proficient with some additional supports.
All right. Thank you very much.